Hi, my name is Trainmaster04 and today I'll be doing something a little bit different. Instead of actually showing you a pre-made structure from either Lionel or MTH, instead I'll be reviewing a custom-made building from Right On Track Models.
Union Pacific 4014. Do you read me? Over. Roger that. Union Pacific 4014. I read you. Over. Start up and stand by. Over. Yes, sir. Start up and stand by.
To start this video, let me actually explain who Right On Track Models is and also actually explain the kind of steps that I went through to actually get to this point of my own special custom-made one-of-a-kind building. Now, before I actually get into deep details about the process that I went through to actually get to this point of actually having my own custom building, let me actually take a minute and actually explain that Right On Track Models is actually a wonderful business to work with. Now, if you're thinking that, oh, they're probably just a bunch of nitty-gritty, stuck-up-nosed people, in short, they really are not. The guy actually that works there and operates everything is very nice and professional. He works with you instead of forcing you, and he actually tries to give you updates when there's actually something to give you. And as you can see, he does a wonderful job in the sense of details. Now, I will later on actually in the video actually tell you about this type of building that I've got for you. But now, let me actually get into the nitty-gritty of all the details, starting at the beginning and then finally ending at the end with the finished product that you see right in front of you. Now, let's actually get into the nitty-gritty details on who Right On Track Models is and also the type of steps that I actually went through to actually get to this end result. To start off, Right On Track Models is actually a model company that has been around for many years, and they specialize in both making kits as well as custom-made buildings from either scratch or via a photo that is either from the past, such as black and white, or up to the modern day era of colored photos. Now, they also specialize in making it to where the buildings are very, very detailed to what they actually have. Now, I will say that not all of their buildings are the exact detail, since they are just working off of a photo, but for what they can actually do, I would actually grade this building and a whole bunch of their other buildings right at the top of the model railroading scale at museum quality. Now that you have a better understanding on who Right On Track Models is and also what they can do, let me actually go and tell you the first step that I took and also the same first step that you would have to take to actually get something like this on your own layout. The first step that I took for Right On Track Models to actually produce one of my own custom-made building started off with me actually filling out a form. Now, don't be scared when I say this and think that this is actually where I sealed the deal or you seal the deal for them to actually build a building. No, I'll actually explain what will later on in this video. The form itself is basically kind of like a questionnaire with a whole bunch of questions on asking you on what kind of building you want them to make, the description of the building that you want them to make, photos, and also some more details such as if you want it to be weathered, what type of decals are there going to be, and also if you want it to be lit or not lit. After I had finished filling out the form, I then submitted it to Right On Track Models and then waited about a couple of days for them to come back saying that they actually accepted or declined my project. Now, after those 2 or 3 days, they did actually accept my project and then actually went ahead and started asking questions on, or more further details, on what kind of building that I actually wanted. Now, after asking my own on some of the questions that they asked me, and then answering their own questions, it then came down to actually coming up with a final estimated price and also some more nitty-gritty details that I need to make a decision on. Once both of our questions and answers were given out, they eventually came back to me with an estimated price as well as some of the options that I can have them do. And after I did choose those options, I then came down to the point of where I had to actually seal the deal and actually have them make this building. Now, as stated earlier, I had to pay a 20% deposit to actually have them make this building and to also show that I was committed to actually wanting them to make this building. Now, after I had done that, they then came back to me and started asking some more questions and me asking some more questions and so on and so forth until they eventually came back with a sketch and for me to review and then either accept or decline. After putting down the 20% deposit and committing to this build, they then, as stated earlier, they then sent me a rough sketch of the building that I wanted them to produce. Now, there were a little bit of communication problems in the sense of my part, since it was difficult for me to actually fully describe this type of building, since it is such a unique building and with a whole lot of family memories connected with it. I then sent them a changed version of the sketch on what I wanted them to change, and then they came back to me with the revised one, and once I put my stamp of approval on it, it was then time for them to actually get started and actually build this building. Now, before I actually get into the next step after this one, let me actually take a minute and actually describe and tell you about the building itself that you see right in front of you. Meaning what kind of building it was, how it's connected with my family, and so forth. To start off, this building is actually a dry goods warehouse, meaning it was a warehouse that actually held dry goods such as flour and sugar. Now, this building was primarily used as a midway point for either holding products to then be distributed to outside towns nearby or to businesses inside of the city itself. Now, in order to actually transport these dry goods, the biggest way was actually via rail. Now, this was done by actually having a rail line going right behind the building as well as many other buildings and being able to stop a car right in front of a loading platform at the back of the building and being able to load each bag of flour, sugar, or so forth onto the car itself and then have a train then pick it up and it be shipped out. Now, there was another way, and that was via trucks. Now, trucks were a good way of moving things, but they were not able to haul as much as a regular car load on rails. So instead, trucks usually either delivered things to or from the warehouse to locations in the city itself or very close distant farm towns, since I am in a farming community. Now, you may be starting to wonder and actually saying towards your screen, Trainmaster 04, answer the question on how is this building connected to your family? Well, let me actually tell you it right now. Around in the early 1930s, my great-great-grandparents actually bought this warehouse from a land grant, which, interesting fact, I still have the original documents, and turned it into the Stewart Storage Company, Bonded Storage. Now, the Stewart Storage Company dealt with dry goods, such as flour, sugars, and whatnot, and was able to actually distribute these dry goods either to businesses inside the city or by transporting the goods to out-of-town cities around in the state. Now, you may be wondering, again, which is good for you, how was these goods actually being shipped to the warehouse and actually being shipped out of the warehouse? Well, there were two main ways. One was by rail, the second way by truck. Let me first start by the rail. One of the biggest business or money-making business for the railroads was actually working with small business owners such as my great-grandparents by actually having a siding go through a small alleyway at the backs of warehouses or bigger businesses, and being able to leave cars for those businesses to either unload or load, and then have them be paid to, or having the railroads to be paid to then have those cars taken out and shipped to out-of-town places, and vice versa for those out-of-town places to the warehouse itself. Now, because of this, warehouses and other businesses were able to ship larger quantities out to out-of-towns for a lower price. Now, as stated, there was another way for shipping, and this was via trucks. Now, trucks at the time, since this was the early 30s into the mid-50s when the warehouse was operated by my great-grandparents and my grandparents, trucks were still pretty much a new thing and haven't been revolutionized as quickly as steam locomotion or, in general, railroads. Now, because of this, trucks were primarily used for distributing products, or goods in other words, to the local businesses in the city itself, or to even out-of-town cities that are really, really close to the city itself. Now that you have a better understanding on what the Stewart Storage Company is and how it's connected to my family, as well as how products were actually distributed to and from the warehouse, let me actually get back to the process on how I was able to get this building itself. Just to recap, I had finally reached the point to where I was actually reviewing a computerized sketch that they had actually sent me. Now, I did have to make a few changes to it since there was a bit of complication on how I described the building to the business, but eventually, after I had made those changes, submitted them, they then came back to me and actually made a better sketch than the one before with all of the changes. Once I had approved that, that is where they actually came to the point of actually beginning to build the model itself. Now, you may be wondering, what kind of products did they use to actually build one of these models? Well, to start off, it's kind of similar to a Menards building where they actually used a smattering of both wood as well as some plastic detailing to actually build the building. Now, they started off with actually building the base with using laser cut wood and then started building the walls up. Now, once the walls were up, they started putting in the doors that were, again, separately applied and specifically cut and made for this building and glued them from the inside. Once that happened, they then started putting some of the decals, such as the Stewart Storage Company sign, both of them, as well as the other decal underneath the awning in the front. Once they had those put up, they then started putting in some of the separately applied detailing, such as steps, walkways, and awnings, and so forth. Once that happened, they then proceeded to actually work on the roof itself and also added some LED lighting strands as well as a feeder wire coming out from the bottom of the building itself. Now, I do need to mention that I wasn't totally in the dark on what kind of things that they were actually doing by making this building, because around the beginning of 3 weeks-ish, they actually started sending me photos or update photos of the current progress that they were actually doing on my building alone. Now, also take note that they actually work one project at a time so that there is no confusion on what building they're working on, what kind of details that need to be done, or what work that needs to be done on each building, but instead they solely work on your personal building so that it is precise to the photo that you sent them and also precisely to what you want them to make it to be. Finally, the day arrived when they actually sent the last set of photos of the final product. And when I saw them, I nearly cried because this was a building that, since it was in my family, it was just amazing to actually see it in a model itself and to also be able to save a piece of family heritage that was long lost ago. Since I actually had the papers and now that I have the building, it was just phenomenal. Eventually, it came down to actually paying for the building itself. Now, payment was actually very reasonable, and since I already paid down the 20%, it was low. The final price was lower than it had originally been when I saw the estimate. This being the deductible of the 20% taken out from the estimated price. From there, they estimated in the shipping price and then packed it in a well-packed box with brown paper wrapped around the building itself and a whole bunch of packing peanuts surrounding the building itself, and then it was shipped to me via UPS. Eventually, UPS actually drove up in front of my house and came out with a huge box with fragile written all over it. And once I saw it, I knew it had to be my building from Right on Track Models. And once I grabbed it off the front porch and held it in my hands, I knew it had to be it. And at first, I wanted to just grab my knife or some scissors and cut open the top and pull it out to see what it looks like in person. But I waited. Now, you may be thinking, if I'm so excited to actually see it, why didn't I do it? There is one simple answer. I wanted to show my grandmother. Now, my grandmother is actually the last family member on my mom's side in the sense of grandparents. And an interesting thing enough, she was actually one of the co-workers in the warehouse itself and did most of the secretary work, such as writing up bills, checks, and also typing up orders. Now, since I had this building made, I primarily wanted her to see it first at the same time as I wanted to see it. But since of this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, I was not able to actually have her come over to my house and see it for herself live. But thankfully, thanks to modern technology, I was actually able to have her FaceTime with me and me actually show her it front to back, since I had not shown her any of the update photos that Right on Track Models sent me as they were building it. And when she saw it, I could hear it in her voice that she was so excited and so happy that this piece of family history was actually saved and preserved, or in other words, recreated. So now I was able to actually have the paperwork for that when my great-great-grandparents bought the land and bought the building, to even to the point of recreating it. And I was just so happy for her and also for Right on Track Models for just doing an outstanding job on this beautiful building. Now that you've actually held in there and heard my story on why I actually had this building custom made, and also what type of steps I went through to actually get to this point of actually having a physical model. But now, let me actually take a closer look of the model and actually show you all of the separately applied and molded in detailing on this wonderful custom built model. Starting at the front right corner on this building, you can first see here's a set of steps which are separately applied and glued onto the base itself with a separately applied and hand-painted handrail. You can see that it leads towards this door into this section of the building. Looking at the base itself, here's the beginning of some nicely done etched brickwork around the base itself, and also the brickwork and brown painted or reddish brown painted brick which is etched into the wood itself. And then finally, here is a separately applied but permanently closed sliding door for any trucks to be loaded or unloaded into the building itself. Moving towards the left, looking at the middle of the building, you can first see here is the front deck loading platform, which was primarily used for loading and unloading trucks that were either inbound or outbound from the city or neighboring towns. Again, you can see here's the continuation of that etched in brickwork, and right here you can see that there is this black mat or black piece of cardboard. Now, you may be wondering, why is that even there? Well, in short, that is actually a mat to actually protect the brickwork from any trucks actually backing up into the side of the building itself. Looking towards the side of the front wall, you can see here is some more brickwork, and right here there's actually a permanently separately applied sliding door. And one of the things that Right on Track Models asked me was the position of the doors themselves. Now in this case, I wanted them to have it partially or mainly open, but still showing that it's actually there. Now looking above there, here's a nice separately applied awning. And interesting thing enough, I know the camera probably can't pick it up, but underneath there are triangle girder beams underneath, and they are separately hand painted and separately applied to the underneath piece of this awning. And to me, that is very, very nice, because that just goes and tells me that there is a whole lot of time put into this one little spot on the building itself. Looking above the awning itself, here is the famous, in family case, Stewart Storage Company's bonded storage sign, which in this case is stenciled in. And also, speaking of advertisement, this is actually a flour bag, which actually was a bit difficult for both me and my grandmother to actually find out. But thankfully, another family member was able to give us some more information about it, since the real advertisement on the real building was too faded. And Right on Track Models was able to actually find an example, which is this, and was able to use it for my project. And then finally, here is a second set of steps which lead up to the loading dock, and yet another separately applied handrail leading up to two other doors, which are permanent but separately applied. Looking towards the left side of the building, again you can see here is the steps, handrail, and the two doors as we saw earlier, but the only thing different on this side is that here is yet another Stewart Storage Company sign. And before I actually move on, I do want to mention that these decals aren't just decals that cover up the bricks, which isn't prototypical to the real world, in which other manufacturers such as Lionel, MTH, and Menards do. Instead, Right on Track Models made these decals actually sink into the bricks themselves individually. So, if you can see, the bricks themselves actually show up in the decal itself, giving the feeling that these signs were actually hand painted onto the building itself if it were a real building. Looking at the right side of the building, you can see that the continuation of the brickwork still goes around and wraps around the building itself, and here we have yet another separately applied but permanent sliding door on this side of the building. Finally, looking at the left side of the building before actually looking at the back of it, you again can see that there is some more molded in detailing in the form of the brick siding right here, as well as some more brickwork on this side of the building. Now, if you look right here, you can see that there are two rectangle sections here and here, more specifically right here, and also a bit of a gap. Now, Right on Track Models isn't perfect, but they are phenomenal in their detailing, as I showed you in the sign work. But if you're wondering what these two sections are, these two sections are actually the joining sections of both this side panel and the front panel coming together. Now, if you look towards the left, you can see here is the end of the rear loading dock, which can be accessed by the railroad siding from the back of the building. Last but not least, here is a back view of the building itself, and starting towards the left of it, you can first see that here is another separately applied but permanent sliding door, which again is mounted from the inside, and also the continuation of the brick siding on the building itself. Looking in the middle, here is the rear loading platform, which again can be accessed by trains. And looking right in the middle, here is another door, which if you notice, this door is actually parallel to the door from the front. Now, this was actually something very specific that both my grandmother and my mother wanted me to put in, since both of them remember this very specifically from both their childhood. And finally, looking right here, here is actually the feeder wire that actually connects all of the LED lighting inside the building itself. Now, I will not be able to show you this lighting since I have actually ran out of wire, embarrassingly a bit, to actually wire this up to a power source and actually turn it on. So maybe later on when I do a layout review of my own layout and show you everything when it's placed out, maybe I'll have some wire then and actually have this wired up to a transformer. Now that I've shown you all of the molded in and separately applied detailing on this model, as well as what kind of craftsmanship Right on Track Models has been able to put into my custom-made building, let me actually go and answer the two questions that I normally answer around the end of each video, which are, what is my personal opinion about this product, if I haven't already expressed it enough, and also, how much did this product actually cost me for Right on Track Models to actually produce? Let me first start off with the lateral question on how much did this product actually set me back? Well, it set me back around $500. Now, this may seem a bit steep, but take in mind that this isn't being made by a machine of some sort with parts that are mass-produced. This is actually a one-of-a-kind, one-of-one building that is only going to be produced once. And that's one of the reasons why it's so expensive. But another reason is this building is, yes, most of the parts are made by a machine, but that has to be actually controlled and then put together by a human being with their own hands and free time. And then also another thing that makes it so expensive is that the decaling is something that you can't go into your local hobby shop that sells decals and be able to slap them onto the building. Instead, the guy Right on Track Models actually had to go and stencil it, find them, and then be able to produce them in the right size for them to actually really look good on the building itself. So if you understand all of this, then maybe $500 sounds a lot better. Now, if you don't want a custom-made building, they do also sell some of their some kits that they've actually either made by themselves or used other people's ideas that were pretty good and popular to most layouts to then sell offhand. Now, I will actually leave a link in the description to their website so that if you actually want to build your own kit, one of their own kits, or actually have them build a custom-made building for you, then you may do so via the link down below. Finally, let me actually give you my personal opinion about Right on Track Models, if you haven't already guessed what it would be. And it is that I give my applause to you, Right on Track Models, and tip my hat to you. Now, do take note that I have not actually been around custom-made buildings and seeing the kind of quality that comes from them in person, by meaning me actually getting them, having them delivered to me, and so forth, like Right on Track Models. But I have seen a whole bunch of them through either museums, photos, videos, and so forth. And to me, Right on Track Models is the best. Now, were there a few problems, such as communication? Yes, that will tend to happen since we aren't talking face-to-face or via phone, but instead we're talking through a computer, via email, and once in a while there should be a few communication errors. But overall, if you are looking for a custom-made building, I would highly suggest looking into Right on Track Models, or even looking into some of their kits if you want something that is highly detailed, simple to use, and also if you're looking for a business that can do what you want them to do without asking too many questions or controlling you, then I highly suggest going through them. Well, it is about time for me to wrap up this video, but before you go, please click on that subscribe button. This will actually allow you to no longer miss any near future videos that I'll be producing, and if you do, I highly appreciate you doing it. And also, please press the like button if you actually saw this video enjoyable and not boring. And also this lets me know that you actually would like to see more videos that I would be producing in the near future. But anyway, my name is Trainmaster04 and I'll be seeing you next time.